Good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Ruizalba. I am professor of marketing at the University of Westminster and leader of this group, Service Research and Customer Experience. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Leeya Hendricks. She combines her senior roles as top executive in multinational firms with her passion for research. Leeya, she completed her PhD, and as an active researcher, she's conducting research and publishing in top journals, while at the same time keeping a busy agenda in the competitive world, corporate world. So congratulations, Leeya. She's passionate in bridging this gap, very important gap between the theory and practice. So she can bring this perspective of practitioner, but at the same time academic. And congratulations for this. Recently, CMO at RIM, AI Tech Sustainability and Management Company, and she's also currently a very important role as a non-executive director of the Chartered Institute of Marketing and also board advisor of the FinTech Marketing Hub. The theme will be a B2B platform perspective on ecosystem development, value co-creation, and upscaling in financial services. And she has a special focus on B2B platform business models. So Leeya, please, thanks for joining us today. And please, you can start whenever you want, and then we will have a Q&A.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Jose, for that. Let me share my screen. Jose, for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm always happy to speak to B2B and technology, so thanks for the introduction. And as outlined by Jose, my doctoral thesis is focused on B2B platforms, and today I'm actually going to talk about building a platform, and specifically we're looking at the engine as part of building a B2B platform. And in this research, we focus on the platform business model, which is, of course, a recent, relevant, and timely phenomenon, but we also explore the topic through an approach by outlining the context, the process, and the content on platforms, with the aim of highlighting how to build a platform. So from the foundation, and then we look at the engine, and then the growth in terms of scaling the platform. So I'll discuss this shortly. And in the research, we delve into B2B platform development. We'll look at ecosystems, networks, and value co-creation practices as part of the platform approach for driving innovation. And we'll also highlight how this is executed on a B2C level, often including examples by PayPal, Uber, Facebook. But here we're going to look at B2B. Of course. So we look at the platform business model as a strategic direction for business-to-business firms within the financial services industry, and then particularly looking at asset management case studies, which we'll highlight and walk through. So I just want to specifically look at how the platform as a service business model can be utilized to break the industry recipe. And we'll also delve in that a little bit more. So let's kick off. So I think the first focus, as I mentioned to you, the actual overall doctoral study looked at three specific papers or three studies where we look at the foundation, the engine, and the growth. But for today, I'd really like to focus on the engine, which is quite key for upscaling. So this research study, if you look at the first one, looks at the development of a platform on which several PaaS initiatives are linked in financial services. And then it specifically looks at asset management as it considers a suitable, focus area, which is, as asset management, it's a revelatory space to discover platform interactions and co-creation based on its institutionalized nature. And the second research study, which we're going to focus on today, is the engine. And it looks at the two different types of PaaS initiatives. These are both case studies from Europe within Luxembourg, so within the hub of asset management, as it were. And we look at two fintech firms. Now, the cases are specific to platform as a service, and we look at value co-creation practices, and it's used to gain insights on this phenomenon of B2B platforms. And then the third research study is focused on the complementer as the lead actor, and we look at similarities between the case studies. But as I mentioned today, we hone in on the second research study, really creating the engine which is needed for scale in the platform. And that's quite critical when you're looking at platform growth. So going back to B2B, I think it's quite important because when you look at many of the papers and research studies, it's often focused on B2C. So you see examples on Facebook, PayPal, Alibaba, Uber. These kind of seemingly disparate companies have come together and driven entire industries by harnessing this phenomenon of platforms. And here we can see often that there's B2C examples, but not B2B business models specifically that look at industry focus areas. And when we look at this B2B business model, we focus more on the actual definition of building personal relationships. While when we look at B2C marketing and B2C platforms, it's more around transactional focus areas. And while the transactional platform focuses more on digital matchmakers, these platforms are more focused on a virtual marketplace or meeting place for people and direct consumers like people, as you've seen on Facebook. Whereas B2B innovation platforms provide more of a technology framework on a larger business scale to customers that can be adapted to individual businesses. And I'm sure you know some such as Oracle and Salesforce, as key big platforms for B2B organizations. And in these case studies, we also look at similar platforms, KYC platforms, blockchain platforms that then service other B2B firms. So this core third-party aspect is the alternative to being a transactional platform, and it enables the exchange of information. So we look at that specifically, and the definition here is really on driving that innovation platform. So from a boundary definition, we follow the definition of innovation platforms rather than transactional. So when we look at the research, I really wanted to delve into the growing focus and the need to look at platform business models. So you can see that I first got interested in this topic, but you can see in 2015, you can see the actual growth from pipeline platforms. You can see the pertinent focus when it continued from 2015 to platform revolution, to then platform scale, even post-COVID. So you can see that this phenomenon continues to grow, and you can now look at the focus areas now, which is more in B2B area, which is still quite sparse, especially when you look at financial services, and specifically in this industry today, when we look at institutionalized environments and the platform orientation, which is quite interesting in this space, because it does look at breaking that recipe. How do you actually co-create value within this space? So when you look at the actual topic, why is it important? I think digital technology really connects people, organizations and the resources within this interactive ecosystem where value can be created and appropriated. Innovation platforms actually enable third-party firms to add their complementary products and services to a core product or technology. Another important key focus is B2B business models that specifically differ in how it is set up, as I mentioned, which is a focus more on relationships, while B2C is more transactional. The other key aspect is PaaS development also allows for highly protected spaces to develop into emerging ecosystems. So it really creates a platform for engagement and then transformational shifts in disruptive innovation. So really unleashing that value innovation initiative, which can bring about change. And that's what we need, really, is change. So we go into fintech and financial services technology when we look at these cases and specifically the research. And it looks at an institutionalized setting, which is the industry recipe. Now, the asset management industry recipe is actually rigid, institutionalized and focused in terms of limited exchange and information. It's fraught with a lot of regulation, secrecy, mistrust, lack of sharing. And those aspects of cognitive, cultural, normative, regulative factors actually restrain change. So we see this cognitive persistence because of institutional logic. And of course, we want to break that. We see this cognitive cultural factors that exist, and managers are really looking to break the restraining logic and disseminate and really disintermediate also the distribution network in the process through technology. So we use this platform to really look at how we break that with compliance, risk mitigation, and a very conservative mindset and culture. So the research study, I want to just delve into this engine. So it looks at stimulating engagement and value co-creation in the fintech generated platform as a service initiative, and it explores the study in the asset management industry. So yeah, more focused really is how the actor how are the active engagement and value co-creation stimulated in different platform as a service settings, and we also examine how the process of active engagement and value co-creation take place in the two fintech platform initiatives, and we want to look at the responding calls for more research and in this area and how engagement unfolds over time. And we really delve into this a little bit more. So I'm obviously going to go through that with you. We then look at the observations and confrontation with extant literature, and we allow the development of the matrix to display the different pathways. And I'm going to go through the different pathways that we propose as well. So going straight into the examples here, you can see that value co-creation in fintech-generated PaaS initiatives. We've got the engine. We look at two cases. So the study focuses on a comparative case design of two different types of PaaS initiatives. As I mentioned, both in Luxembourg from a fintech, so I refer to them as Epsilon and Zeta here, but there are cases that are specific to platform as a service.
Can be found at
Oh, sorry, Ida. I think you're not on mute. I thought perhaps you were asking a question. The One Platform as a Service initiative is a content provider which really adopts a freemium business model with a niche offering as part of the value chain. And then the other market infrastructure looks at more of a subscription-based model. And this provides the technology foundation for the content distribution. And so we'll unpack both of these, but both platforms are cloud-based, focused on automation, and it provides the access to a network to create a better user experience and also a value proposition for customers. So one of the firms is globally operating content platform, and the other is more of a globally operating infrastructure platform. And the case outlines two purposefully sampled firms. That includes 6 firms as part of the ecosystem. So it's a very complex market, especially when you look at it from a financial services perspective. And we find that in this environment, there's a holding back in terms of engagement, but also ideas that are held close to the chest, where there's not a lot of sharing in terms of data. So we want to really break that. And the research context is particularly interesting because of this compliance. Okay, so here you can see that we observe how these processes of upscaling differ according to the type of the platform as a service. So we look at actor engagement as it acts as a prerequisite to the initial value co-creation practices, and it leads to this kind of virtuous actor engagement and value co-creation circle. So although the circle is present in both initiatives, one PaaS case gains more momentum than the other. We plot the scaling of these trajectories of the two cases in this actual 2x2 matrix. And you can see on the Y and the X axis how we've actually outlined this. So on both platforms, engagement is realized. And within the freemium platform as a service model, it stimulates active engagement and value co-creation through real-time data exchange and the improvement of value propositions and co-production, which is really done quicker. So there's quicker feedback loops, and there's a select few of a few actors. So it's very specific. It creates recurrent feedback loops that are more frequent while upscaling faster. and the number of engaging clients is wider. It's got a wider data set and far more clients that provide feedback. So there's co-sharing, there's co-production, and there's co-design. Whereas if you look at the other from a Zeta perspective, with its subscription model, it stimulates an AE that is more efficient in terms of value interaction. So here there is more of a cooperative ecosystem by using blockchain to automate and mutualize the processes. That's the example of the case. You can see that through trust stimulating the actual case in the company, they build a wider engagement by multiple connected actors. So you can see that the distribution of investment managers, the transfer agents, investors, all of these actors, it results more in joint activities such as sharing information. And this, of course, does create a difference. Whereas if you see in the Epsilon freemium model, right, here you can see a different trajectory. So the core functionality of the application here is more free, and it works on an internal currency such as points that can be used to unblock various features. That's what the platform actually drives. So there's more fund groups and distribution engagement with distributors that join the platform. And the greater the added value becomes through the whole chain, you can see that the subscription model with the exchange of applications and services, you actually see that there's far more engagement. So on the other side, there's transfer agents that perform the validation of KYC. And while these asset managers can follow up on inflows and outflows, you can actually see that in real time, there's a lot more engagement. So the one, freemium, community building through a viral path in the platform value co-creation approach, in active engagement and value co-creation co-evolution. And then the path two, which is more subscription, there's an ecosystem building through a stepwise, more of a controlled path, and the AE-dominated approach in the subscription platform. So in the freemium PaaS model, we identify a community-building viral path that is focused on knowledge sharing, where actors have freedom to really share data and knowledge first one-on-one as part of the community, and then are creating a more of a natural flow of the process. Where knowledge sharing is obviously more aligned to interaction and trust is more generated. And then the other, of course, is more of a stepwise approach where there's a lot more control. And of course, this is slower and it limits more of the exchange and the interaction. So there you can see that value co-creation and active engagement is actually held back slightly. So when we look at the findings, it shows how platform initiatives enable value co-creation, and the link between active engagement and value co-creation is established. We observe how the platform type helps co-creation practices and how it increases the utilization of the platform to create the engine with more frequent interactions and really to unleash the co-creation potential. We look at how it impacts the value co-creation in platform as a service strategy, and also how this value co-creation differs in the PaaS strategy. So you see in the two, and it's also, of course, very complex given the environment, but also when you're looking at the freemium and the subscription platform as a service processes. So through the stimulus response of faster feedback loops over a shorter period of time, we see closer relationships that are built, and efforts are really driven through value co-creation practices. We look at those two paths, as I mentioned, the viral community building, and the other one is more of a controlled ecosystem. But we define that the actual feedback loops as part of the platform as a service strategy is actually a trigger for co-creation, and this enables value. So we unpack these two cases, which obviously we find within our findings then drives our propositions. So we have two propositions and within that two key areas. In the first proposition, we look at value co-creation that actually takes place. So here we look at the community that needs to be built. Actors need to engage in the platform, such as trust building. One-to-one is required. This allows for more of a knowledge sharing. that in turn creates the interdependencies, and it leads to value co-creation. Whereas also within that, you have the community building, which is easier to create in an open, free access structure. So where less barriers exist and that one-to-one interaction takes place frequently, and trust building happens quicker. Whereas in the paid platform, for structure, the paid requirement creates a barrier. So there's less interaction. It's slower, and the paid requirement does hinder the trust building and the community building. The second proposition is really focused on the increased feedback loops, which enhances the improvement and the upscaling of the platform. So through the focus of customer needs and customization, with these increased interactions that take place, and the voluntary integration of resources, it actually enables actors' value co-creation. So the actor engagement enables co-production of value propositions in one-to-one engagement, and value co-creation then drives co-creation of value through integration of resources. So it pushes the boundaries of actor engagement, where we see that this ongoing feedback loop occurs, and it increases improvement and results in the upgrading of the business model. So that's actually where you see greater utilization and the need for that upscaling. So with the increased feedback loops, you drive value enhancement of the platform as a service utilization and of the platform itself, so increased utilization. When we look at the theoretical contributions, we obviously want to look at enhancing B2B platform theory. So we want to present up-to-date underlying barriers, the levers, the opportunities for platform business models. It's a multidisciplinary mid-range theory contribution to 3 key areas, which is strategic management, service theory, and B2B platforms. We look at contributing to a growing field. So really looking at that inductive interfirm level of how institutional factors impact B2B platforms. And then the retrospective longitudinal research. So here we look at more B2B platforms as a service, and we showcase the journey over time, and then further service and support to fostering theory. So service theory by providing recommendations for organizations aiming at delivering platforms as a service. And we want to shed light on the challenges faced when undergoing value co-creation in these high-risk settings. So really highlighting ways to create utilization for a platform as a service. And then really just to close in terms of the practical contribution and the managerial implications, we do look at it providing practitioners in financial services and asset managers with that institutionalized B2B market setting, and how to drive value co-creation through utilizing the platform as a service strategies. We look at highlighting the complexities of the ecosystem development and also the platform as a service models. We look at that resource integration and the practices in terms of engaging and really increasing that value co-creation. Generalizability, of course, this research is specific in this context and is context dependent, but given its characteristics in similar settings, it can be transferable. So when you look at regulation, secrecy, mistrust, lack of sharing, it can be adapted and applied to similar settings and therefore transferable in that setting. And from a managerial implication, of course, cases show that platforms has the power to disrupt even highly complex and heavily regulated service markets, and managers of these financial institutions can leverage the research to disrupt the industry. And then, of course, similar complex markets to drive change and innovation. So it outlines these managerial practices that can help managers really to navigate this complex settings and to successfully develop platform ecosystems from a foundation to an engine and then to growth. And then the recommendations to close off, and I welcome any questions or feedback. Yeah, we really outlined the key areas. And as I said to you, it's quite an in-depth study where we look at the foundation, engine, and growth. But in this specific paper, I obviously just wanted to highlight the utilization of the platform at the engine. And yeah, we actually outline the steps. So we conclude with the propositions that are outlined. And we recommend that through the research study of the utilization of the platform, there are 3 steps. So one is the co-evolution of actor engagement and value co-creation practices, which facilitates platform utilization. It allows for further exchange with increased interactions that result in value co-creation as part of the platform as a service strategy. And then step 2, it's the combination of platform as a service strategy steps and the AE and value co-creation practices that facilitates the community building. And that community building is quite important for creating that engine and then scaling. And then step 3 is really that increased feedback loops, which enhances improvement and upscaling of the platform. So we do think that that's quite key. And of course, we recommend that, those 3 steps are then initiated to ensure that that engine is then created. So I did try and keep to the timing. Of course, I've outlined our research as best as I could in a very succinct way. But thank you so much for your time, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Leeya. Anyone have a question? You can raise your hand, or I would suggest you can use the microphone. Janice, please.
Hello, thank you very much for the wonderful paper. It's very interesting and it looks like a very challenging work. I really appreciate it. But I was very curious to tell me a bit more on how feedback loops are actually working between the 2 different settings. You told about the freemium and the subscription, 2 settings. And then you explain the importance of feedback loops, and I get it rationally, but I don't understand the practicality of it. I mean, how do the feedback loops work and enhance the whole value creation process? Sorry for my ignorance.
No, it's thank you, and that's a very good question. So I'm just going to go back to the slides. At least you can kind of see it. Of course, the feedback loops is more around the value co-creation and the actor engagement. So I think it's really good to define that. It's based on ensuring that there's engagement and constant engagement between the actors. And yeah, you can see that there are 2. Now, the feedback loops, when you look at the actual platform, some actually don't allow for any feedback or engagement. It's very much a process of utilizing the platform and nothing comes back to the customer. So in the community, we can engage. We're exchanging knowledge. I give you feedback. I co-create value. We can actually improve. So I refer to the improvement of the content on the platform or the service itself. But that's what actually drives the value co-creation, is if we can get improvement, if we can talk, if we can exchange. Now, in the other one, if there's a lack of trust or there's mistrust, I'm not going to be sharing any feedback with you. So therefore, there's nothing that's open. I'm going, well, I'll keep this to myself. We'll just select a few partners that we'll engage with. We won't do the open community flow and exchange of knowledge and exchange of content. Whereas if it's free flow, right? It's open. There's exchange of many actors engaging in content sharing. So we can improve things a lot better on the content, on the service, on the platform. The other one, of course, is, as I mentioned, you're holding back. So because you're paying for it, there's not really a 2-way. I'm paying for the platform. You're giving me a service. So it goes back to that transactional platform I mentioned earlier, where if it's transactional, I'm paying for the subscription. I'm getting something back. I'm not necessarily going to give you any feedback. Yes, maybe I might complain about something or, not necessarily be happy, but it's not open. There's not an open community flow of exchange of information. So therefore, there's slight holding back of sharing. And therefore, there's no quick content loops. So it's far slower. There's less that gets shared. And therefore, of course, it means that innovation there's a barrier, there's a hindrance. So that actual value co-creation can't happen as quick as you would like with the feedback loops.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. I thought when you would be paying, you would have a greater interaction, because I'm paying money, so I expect more, so I will be in more direct contact. And this is a very interesting finding. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hafid, please.
Thank you so much for the excellent presentation, first of all. As Jose said, I'm from a different discipline. I'm from finance. So I'm just interested on the concept of value, how you defined value and your focus on the fintech sector. I mean, how value is conceptualized in the study, and also why specifically the fintech industry?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that question. We look at the definition from value co-creation, really specifically here. Naturally, you look at value co-creation and you think of Foggo and Loosh. You look at key seminal papers in that regard. But we steer here specifically in actor engagement and that interaction, and we look at Storbacher. And that is important because, of course, that actual value is more around the engagement of the actors. So how does the resource integration work? How do you actually interact in terms of the engagement that takes place, and how that co-sharing, that co-production, and the co-design of the feedback enables value. So we determine value on the basis of the actors engaging on the as part of the platform and the scaling of the platform. That, of course, then creates the value of co-sharing, co-production, and co-design. On your second question of fintech, why fintech? As I was mentioning earlier, leveraging value co-creation and actor engagement in the space is interesting because it's seen as a very, and specifically asset management, because it's seen as very institutionalized. So we know that there's a lot that needs to be done in this space, as you know, from a mistrust perspective, or really not necessarily sharing a lot. And so we want to break that industry logic. And we see that platforms is a great way of doing that. So when you trigger this sharing and co-production and co-engagement, of course, it breaks that industry recipe of bringing in technology that can help more sharing in this space. And so, yes, fintech, of course, financial technology, it helps from a setting to break the industry recipe, but it's also very interesting around the technology. It's an industry where there's a lot more technology that can happen, and you can disrupt an industry with emerging technologies.
Just if you don't mind, I can add 2 questions as well. You mentioned, I mean, there's propositions, and you mentioned the theories at the end in terms of your contributions. The point I want to make here is how those theories have underpinned, I mean, your propositions, how you have used, I mean, the theories or the concepts to build those propositions or those propositions. And the second point I would like to mention here is about your research methods. I mean, going through your presentation, I mean, maybe because of my discipline or whatever, I mean, I cannot see where the research methods are. I mean, yes, to generate those findings.
No, that's a very good question. I actually do have it here, but I try to, kind of scale down the actual the presentation just in terms of timing. But yes, we look at it from a comparative case design. It is inductive, so very much from a theoretical perspective. We actually drive it more from qualitative. We include, it's 21 interviews, specifically executive individuals. That was part of the decision-making process. So it needed to be individuals that were part of the platform ecosystem development build. So naturally, that becomes the senior stakeholders. And so therefore, all on a C-suite level, from sales to the CEO, to the chief product officer. Very interesting, and this is also part of my study, is the chief marketing officer. It's very interesting that the chief marketing officer is actually a key part of that enablement as well. So these actors across all functions of the business on the C level was part of the study. So very specific in having prerequisite and being part of the platform build. Yes, I think that covers the interviews, the actual research design, and how we built on the actual theory. I've got another slide, but I can go through that in a lot more detail. We look at the active engagement, so we build on that, as I mentioned, from Storbacher, and how we actually drive the co-creation practices from Fargo and Lush. And we actually outline what is active engagement, how do we actually drive that co-production, the co-evolution and the co-design, and specifically those definitions, and then the value co-creation rather from how you co-create value specifically in the platform space. So really looking at Chowdhury and Parker and Van Alstyne in terms of the actual platform build, and then really co-creating value on the actual platform itself between actors at an active level. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leeya. Roshan, please.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Leeya. Great research findings and all. If you go back to the 2x2 matrix, so I just have one question.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
So yeah, it is very good findings, but I got kind of question whether it's kind of the value co-creation. When it comes to value co-creation, engagement is one of the part of value co-creation. So how you uniquely separate engagement from value co-creation? You might have something like on the line on the 2x2 matrix, let's say between the down, you might have overlapping kind of concepts. Do you have that kind of findings, or you don't have? You have 4 unique quadrants only, because it's enable inside the value co-creation some part of engagement there. So you might have kind of overlapping. Maybe you can find some on the line on the 2x2 matrix. Do you have that, or you don't have it? You have unique 4 sets of quadrants only, your findings.
Yes, so thank you. That's very interesting. Yes, you'll see on the actual, and thanks for that question, you'll see that on the axis, we do outline actor engagement and then, of course, customer engagement. And we do define the focus of it more on the actor engagement rather than just the customer engagement. So we actually create a boundary definition in that regard, right? There is overlap, as you say, where, customer engagement forms part of actor engagement, but we look at the actor engagement specifically when we outline engagement itself. So not only from a customer space, but all the actors that co-create value, that could be from an internal perspective and external perspective, not only, from a customer one-on-one. And then, yes, to answer your question, we outline, the second question was, yes, from a dyadic exchange, we look at it from specifically if you look at value co-creation, as you know, it's transactional, but it's not linear, as it were. We look at the exchange of it being dyadic, so that it's two-way approach rather than just on a one-way scale and growth. The key thing here is the two-way dyadic engagement through many actors, and not just one-on-one through a transactional linear approach.
Thank you. And one last question from me. I partially agree with one of the things you mentioned, B2B relational, B2C transactional. I think it's B2C also relationship oriented, because otherwise, customer loyalty, it's going to be challenging for, B2C segment. So probably you mean kind of concrete kind of definition, generalization on B2C, kind of, transactional. I just wondering what is your rationale behind, because I'm coming from relationship-oriented marketing anyway. Just want to find out your insight, because I like to say more relationship-oriented as well, B2C, than say, okay, this is transactional. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, that's a very good question. I get that quite often, actually. But I think when you look at the, because of course, different practices in terms of your focus area. But when you look at the boundary definition specifically on platforms here, it is very specific to relationships versus transactional, being the actual e-commerce platform. So if you recall the initial the definition I gave at the beginning, the one does require engaging individuals and actually speaking to them and building relationships. Whereas when you're actually looking at it from a transactional perspective on an e-commerce platform, you aren't necessarily going to be engaging relationships. You're paying for something, you're getting it back, right? And that goes back to these two X and Y axis outlined here as well. It doesn't always require you to speak to or really exchange value through relationship building. That community creates a relationship building orientated process, whereas the other, of course, just means it's transactional and there is less engagement. So yes, I can see your point, but in this specific process and this definition of platforms, we do take Chowdhury's definition specifically on innovation platforms, which actually looks at that definition.
Perfect. Yeah, very contextual one. You pick it up. So thank you very much for your clarification.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. Maria Jose, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, first, Leeya, for your very interesting presentation. I work on quite a parallel path to yours because I have worked from this actor engagement approach from Mr. Baca, and I really think innovation ecosystems work in a different way. And I think innovation, I would like to know your perspective, arises in a different way. My different approach is I work on crowdfunding ecosystem and fintechs. And I see in this context, what do you think? Maybe the actor, the customer is not anymore the core of all decisions. I mean, innovation arises through interaction from all the actors, which we call balance centricity. And also, I would like to know your opinion about how the blurring roles of actors, we cannot speak so much about specific roles, not even B2B, as you said in the beginning, but I would say actor for actor, as some authors say, because they all develop these blurring roles of actors that we call all the actors develop different roles, and we are not in the same role anymore. I would like to know your perspective on these ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your feedback. And I think, exactly what you said is what I was explaining to the gentleman before this. I think it was Roshan. If you look at the outline here on the slide where we look at engagement, it's exactly what you said. We outline that customer engagement and the actor engagement. As you mentioned, right, there's more actors. So it's not only about the customer anymore, it's more about all the actors that co-create value on the platform, right? So totally agree with that. And that's what we try to outline, that the value of the actors, the roles that the actors play, how they actually co-create value is so critical, and getting that right when you actually engaging your customers, and that customer experience and the user experience on these platforms are so important. So yes, to your first point, totally, we do align with that definition, and we do outline that, as you can see on that axis. Your second question on the back of actors, how do I see the roles of the actors? I think it's interesting because you would have seen that I outline a third paper. The next paper actually looks at the lead actor as a complementer. So the actors are quite critical because you can either look at it as a lead actor that takes the lead and actually then drives the beneficiary versus the actual lead. So are you the lead in building the platform, and there's someone who's actually, or there's an actor that's benefiting from this? So how does that relationship work as the actor? Are you the actor leading it, and does the beneficiary then get the most value out of this platform? Or is it a two-way engagement? Or actually also, how do these actors then become complementers? How do all of these roles within this actor engagement, who's actually driving it, who's actually supporting it, and who gets to engage with the customer directly as well. So we see in the third paper, to answer your question, which I think is also very interesting, complementers tend to be more behind the scenes, yet the lead actor is the one engaging the customer, and yet the value sits within that complementer. So the actor, and I'm sharing this as an example, the role of the actor changes, because the complementer need not be behind the scenes. They actually can start to lead in engaging with the customer and driving that actor co-creation. They need not be behind the scenes and actually just complement a service. They can actually be at the forefront of driving that customer engagement. So I hope that answers your question around actors. You see a lot of dynamics in the lead versus the beneficiary, the co-creator, and then actually that complementary service. Within this space, of course, we see that engagement in terms of all those actors I had mentioned. When you're seeing distributors, asset managers, the transfer agents, the more actors, the better for the platform, because there's far more co-creation and quicker feedback loops. When you look at the paid for platform, there's select actors. So the fewer actors, the more control. And that actually then limits the engagement. And there you're only seeing asset managers and distributors. So two kind of sets of actors, there's far less engagement. Whereas the other one, of course, you see at least 6-7 sets of actors, and that creates far more sharing.
Very interesting. And one more thing, we also have studied not only the more actors, the better, of course, but also the more heterogeneous actors, as Peter said, like homopathic, heteropathic. How you know about that? If actors are more different, it's supposed to, because there is a study we developed related to this content, and as long as the actors are different from different, the resources are more rich and there is more capability for innovation.
Correct.
That's it.
You hit the nail on the head, that diversity of actors, because you're driving resource integration as well. And I'm sure you know the area by Bruce. I look at that as well, Bruce et al. Around the more resource integration, the better, because all the resources come with different value. And then, of course, that then creates further, I guess, value on the platform itself, because they all come with their own focus areas. So again, transfer agents, investment managers, distributors, they come with different value offerings and perspectives. So yes, it adds far more nuances to the platform itself.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, please.
Hi, thanks for that talk. I've got to confess, I've just come into academia from industry, creative industry, so quite a lot of that went straight over my head. But for the last few years, I've done a lot of work with asset management companies, internal communications, and not so many fintechs. But you mentioned marketing directors or marketing people. At what stage could they take this and then use it in outward-facing marketing? In other words, what's the practical marketing output of all of this? And are you allowed to give any examples, or is it all hush-hush?
No, thank you. I think that is such an important point, and that's why I alluded to it earlier, because I didn't want to take too much focus on what we're doing, but or what we're discussing here today. But no, it's really important. I think the chief marketing officer or marketers are actually enablers and interfunctional leads. Jose also has a paper specifically in that area, when you actually look at the interfunctional lead or the marketing, a lead as bringing all of that together. And so to answer your question, I think the marketer is a key actor in this development of platforms, because they actually bring all of the actors together. And I say that because when you're looking at the chief product officer and you're looking at creating this platform, the marketer actually engages the chief product officer in terms of what does the platform look like? How are we actually going to create economies of scale? What does the pricing structure look like? How are we going to position it externally? And then that discussion happens with the chief product officer and then the C-suite. So by C-suite, I mean, is it then the CEO, the CFO? So specifically myself, I was actually part of all of these actual builds of these platforms. And so I can speak to it. We look at 4 different companies, and within each of them, I was actually part of it in that regard, right? So I look at it externally, but I also have, of course, practical knowledge in terms of how this has taken place internally. And so, externally, of course, with the client, because these are all customers. So yeah, to answer your question, marketers definitely can take this in terms of the engine, the foundation, the engine, and the growth, and actually say, as a marketer, how do I create value beyond, being just a supportive player? I can take this and actually go and engage every stakeholder in the business and play a bigger part in driving B2B platforms and the bold in that regard. So I think marketers can take this and actually say, listen, I can actually work with customers to build a platform from start to end, and then actually drive it. So you leading these discussions rather than just being a supporter in terms of the discussions.
Thank you.
And I think just to add to that, because I'm, of course, very passionate about it, I think that often we know in the industry, marketing is often seen as, yes, the growth drivers, but at the same time, almost secondary to all the conversations. And I think this allows a marketer a key platform for having a seat at the table. So actually saying, listen, you want marketing to step in later on in the process to drive external awareness once everything is completed. And I think that's the wrong approach altogether. Marketers need to be part of these discussions right from the get-go. So they understand the economies of scale, they understand the value of the platform, they understand how to market it, but they also understand how to actually drive commercial strategies. And so I think it really provides that platform for marketers. So a very key question, and thank you for that. I'm actually building on that in terms of research. So thanks. So I think Roshan has a question.
Yes, Roshan.
Thank you very much, again. So I just wanted to know your research implication to other areas like, infrastructure as a service, data as a service, because there are lots of cloud-based technology enabled. So how you can generalize your findings to other platform-based like infrastructure as a service models? Do you have any implication, or do we need to apply totally different kind of, concepts for the other platforms? What do you think?
Yes, I think that's also a very, very good question. We look specifically at platform as a service, not from an infrastructure perspective, but because that would be different. So yes, to your point, Roshan, from a technical perspective, I think certainly when you're looking at data exchange, yes, that's relevant. When you look at the actual platform as a service infrastructure, and if you define it specifically around platform as a service, yes, I think you can, this is transferable into those spaces. But when you're looking at more of a software as a service or infrastructure as a service, as you know, IaaS and SaaS is different to a PaaS offering, right? So we look specifically at PaaS, platform as a service models, and how the engagement happens on platform, not looking at software, not looking at infrastructure. So we would need to delve deeper into how this relates in the other as a service, but we only look at platform as a service. Transferable, of course, in the setting. So as you mentioned, and we discussed earlier, contextually, all of this can be transferable if you look at health. If you look at pharma, right, it's very much institutionalized. Even education, we've had discussions around that. So how would you engage when you look at an institutionalized setting of education, right? That can also relate. So there are instances where we potentially will look at research in future on how do you transfer this in other institutionalized settings, which can be transferable.
Thank you, Leeya.
Thanks, Roshan.
I would like to make you a question. Leeya, it's about the the concept of customer experience management, because the complexity is very huge, as we have seen, or the concept of balanced electricity, multi-actors. I was looking into a model from Kumar. He distinguished between the platform as a service enabler, but also you have the service provider and the service customer. So, for instance, in the case of Airbnb, who is the customer? Can you consider only the users of the platform and also the hosts? So they don't have different, or they might have conflicted interests, this type of actors. So how do you see the customer experience management from this platform perspective?
I think that's a very good question, because when you're looking at customer experience, we don't delve into that in the study, to be honest. Again, we look at specifically the actor engagement, so that deters or moves on a bit more. And then you can see that there when we look at customer engagement, customer experience, which is an extension of it, but we don't go deep into that. But to answer your question, of course, when you're looking at the customer experience, that does, here we look at it from an inter-firm level. So very much looking at, that engagement on a firm rather than a customer engagement. So we don't refer to how does the customer engage, what is the feedback from the customer, rather than the actors internally, and I use in inverted commas, but the actual actors that then engage with customers. So, for example, asset managers, distributors, transfer agents, they're all actors that then engage with the end customer, right? So here, the customer itself is the lead and the beneficiary. And that's how we define it rather in your space. So it's really, how does the experience work across the actors in terms of the service offering? And once they then create value, they then able to interact with their customers, which is the end user, like ourselves, when we're engaging in portfolios and using their service offerings. Because it goes back to B2B.
Okay, thank you very much. So any final question or comment? We had a very intense session in 1 hour with a lot of questions and comments. So very, very interesting and engaging. So, thank you very much, Leeya, for being with us and all the 21 participants that we have today. We will do the editing of the video. We will upload soon, hopefully in LinkedIn. In LinkedIn and in YouTube.